How have you been?
I've been good, Nick. It's funny enough because we talked a little bit about like reviewing shit, and the one bad thing about having to review stuff for other people is sometimes you have this internal thing that's like, oh, I want to watch Big Trouble in Little China for no reason, but here I got a stack of 5 things that I have to review, and then it's like. It's first world problems because it's not like
right,
it's like, oh, I have to review this stuff. It just makes it because like from Mill Creek and the other guy, I get to kind of request. It's like, oh, I've got a big docket right now. None of these interest me. I'll just skip this. Vinegar Syndrome is like Wild Wild West. It's like I'll maybe get 1 movie or I'll get 7. I have no way of knowing. So it's like I always have this internal fear that, oh man, if I don't record stuff, I'm going to lose the opportunity to do this and yada yada yada. So what I've started doing, because like I'll also tell myself, it's like, oh, maybe Amanda will want to watch this, and trying to get a time where me and Amanda can both sit down and watch a movie is tough.
Yeah.
So what I started doing the other day is in the morning before work, she starts work at 7 a.m. I don't start work until 10. That gives me a couple hours to nothing to do. And I would throw like Twilight Zone or stuff I've seen before on in the background. I was like, how about I just put on something that they sent me, even for just a half hour, and just watch it like I would a TV show. I hate breaking stuff up, but it's a good way to knock through stuff faster.
Yeah, especially when you're not particularly inspired to put it in the first place.
Yeah, well, now and then instead, like when I have time with Amanda, instead of being like, let's watch Bloodsuckers from Outer Space, it's like, oh, we can watch something we want to watch, and I'm kind of knocking through this other stuff in a quicker pace. So that's what I've been doing recently. So it took me 3 years to figure out a system to watch this stuff, as opposed to like I need to dedicate 2 hours of my day to watching this, and it's just too difficult. But if like, oh, half hour here, half hour there. Easy.
Yeah. Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one thing I before we actually get to the movie, because since you're talking about 70s and 80s horror films, I got to show Amanda The Shining for the first time.
Ooh,
and she really liked. And I got burnt out on The Shining for a little bit, where there was a period of time where I was seeing the movie a lot because of like when I was in film school, it's also, let me go back a little bit. It's a movie that every Halloween people show for one reason or another. And for me, I'm very weird because I watch horror films all year round. I kind of try to plan it by vibe. And for me, The Shining does not feel like a fall horror movie.
No, winter.
Winter would make more sense.
Yeah.
But like when I was in film school, there was 1 year where I saw it 4 times in an October season. And I was like, I'm good on this movie for a very long time.
Scratched your Shining itch.
And then it's coming back a couple of times that I was like, oh, it's been a while since I've seen that. Let's give it another. And it's never that I disliked it. I just saw it way too many times. But with Dr. Sleep coming out. And Amanda had read that book, not having read The Shining or not having read or seen The Shining, but she still enjoyed the book. And then I noticed that Mike Flanagan, who directed the film, is using a lot of imagery from Kubrick's film, which makes sense, even though Stephen King doesn't like that movie. It's the most commonly well-known version of The Shining. It would be dumb to ignore that.
Right.
So it makes sense. So I was like, well, I want to go see Dr. Sleep. I don't think she'd be terribly confused, but it can't hurt to rewatch The Shining. And the thing that I love, and it will tie back into this episode later on, is that Jack Torrance is fucking insane from the first frame.
Right. It's not that the hotel creates something within him; it finds it and draws it out.
Yeah. Real quick, since you've been watching older horror films,
we also watched The Omen.
I have never seen The Omen. Yeah,
we can do an episode on it. I have the box set.
We could. We could just keep pushing Taxi Driver back until after, or just do Taxi Driver and then throw in The Omen.
We got to do The Omen.
We did.
He wants me to kill a child.
I've never seen it. Well, I got a recommendation for you, and if you don't have a way to watch it, I can lend you my account, my Shudder login. The Changeling with George C.
I have not
Scott.
seen that.
It is fantastic. It is my favorite haunted house film ever. Ever.
I have seen, like, I think I caught, like, 15 minutes of it on a TV airing one time. Like, yeah, it's not...
That movie makes a bouncing ball the scariest thing you've ever seen.
That's the scene that I saw.
Yeah, and it's so... and then when you see the leading up to it, oh, it's phenomenal. Yeah. The 80s usually affectionately get the credit for being, like, the best time for horror. And things like The Shining and technically even... The Shining, like, was technically the 80s. They were kind of spillover. Like, Poltergeist itself was 1982, but the early 80s is kind of still spillover from the 70s. The 70s,
I like 70s.
Is still, for me, my favorite time period in horror films.
And spill over into early 80s, but that's still, like, the 70s feel... I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and like last night we just watched Poltergeist, and I'd seen it one time before. I only saw it because Amanda said she loved it so much, and it was not that I was necessarily like, oh, I don't want to watch Poltergeist. It just hadn't come up, and that movie is flawless.
Is it Craig T. Nelson?
Yes. I joked with her, and I was like, man, do we have to do an episode on Poltergeist? Well, we don't talk about the movie. We just talk about the weirdness in Poltergeist. Like, just the weird little things, like Craig T. Nelson's performance and, like, weird things that we noticed in the background. The fact that one of the final shots of the movie has him tripping over a bicycle for no reason, and just goofy little stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I forgot about the no chewing.
Oh, it's all right. I can cut it out. I can... But I guess we should get to the actual episode. This preamble's gone on for almost a half hour, though a little bit of it's getting cut out. All right.
Warning! This movie podcast actually discusses movies. Be aware that it may discuss any of the following elements: endings, surprise twists, unexpected cameos, and all manner of spoilers. If this doesn't appeal to you, why listen to a movie podcast? Without further ado, please enjoy our feature presentation, The Shameless Picture Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode. Ooh, I really got my mics all not happy at me. Let me do that one more time. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Shameless Picture Show. I am Michael Viers, and with me, as always, is a man whose secular education gives him right to question the church.
Nick Richards.
You can question any church you want because of your secular education.
Hell yeah.
For those of you who had not heard, because I think it's funnier this way that I cut out the conversation about it, we have just rewrote that. Normally, I leave it up to myself to find a quote or a moment from the movie to make into that, but Nick's like, I've got one for you, and he's only done it a handful of times. I could probably count on one hand how many times he's like, I'm requesting a rewrite before he's even gotten a chance to read what I wrote. He's like, I don't care what you wrote, here's my rewrite.
I was a little more polite. I was like, do you have something great? Do you have something? And you were like, it's all right. It's not even. I'm like, yeah, okay. Then I know.
No, you should all realize. He should like, do you have something great? It's like, yeah, I do. It's like, too bad you're using this.
I'm from the Midwest. I am way too nice to just trample over your right.
You're way too nice, probably even for the area that you live in currently.
By Midwest, yeah.
All right.
I'm so polite.
But I guess before we get to the topic again, would like to give a little shout out. I'd like to take a moment to discuss the passing of a horror icon. I know you don't have a whole lot to say about this, Nick, but I feel like I'd be remiss if a movie podcast did not at least mention it.
Yeah.
The one and only Sidney Eddie Moisian. I don't know if I pronounced his last name correct. Sidney Eddie Moisian, a.k.a. Sid Haig. He passed away September 21st, 2019 from complications from an infection in his lungs. Passed away after my birthday, which is a little sad that I'm always going to have that bookended with my birthday weekend. But we'd like to remember the way Sid lived his life. He was a prolific actor and had been, according to IMDb, in 149 roles.
Ooh.
And was well loved at horror conventions. We don't have time to go over... We don't have time to go over all of his roles, but here's some of his noteworthy entries. He was in the 60s Batman TV show. He was in 2 episodes. He played like a court bazier. Who was the villain in the original Batman who was like Egyptian themed?
Ooh, that's out of my wheelhouse.
But anyways, he played a royal apothecary. He was in a lot of TV shows. Like, he was in everything from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He was in The Flying Nun. He was in, like, Fantasy Island. He had Charlie's Angels. He had done all of them at one point. He was in... his first big breakout role was along with Lon Chaney Jr. in Spider Baby. He was in George Lucas's THX 1138. A movie from our friends at Vinegar Syndrome, Wonder Women. A movie, he was in Coffee with Pam Grier, as well as Foxy Brown. He was in a movie that has the best title ever, Black Mama, White Mama. Bone Tomahawk, and most notably, he was in Rob Zombie's trilogy of House of 1000 Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and Three from Hell, which I'm going to go on a whim and say is how most people know him from.
Familiar, yeah.
He had done a lot before that, obviously, but it's what gave him a resurgence in his career, because by the time that happened, he wasn't acting. He was doing some other things in his life. He had actually a career outside of acting that I'm trying to remember what it was. I can't remember what he did. It was something along the line. He did some sort of psychology or something like that, where it was completely out of acting altogether, and he had his own like firm set up. And I just remember on a podcast I was listening to, they had found his side business, and they're like, when we first moved out to California, we found his side business, and we gave him a call, and like he was using his real name under that business.
Okay.
And so like when he answered the phone, he was pleasant and everything. They're like, can we speak to Sid Haig? Long pause, because he wasn't using that name on there, and he just goes,
right.
Who the is this? And they hung up. I don't remember which episode. It was probably on. I think that story's from the podcast, The Movie Crypt, on their Sid Haig episode, where he's actually on the episode listening to them tell him that story.
Nice.
So that's worth checking out. But I wanted to at least mention him because, like I said, he's prolific. He's one of those. He's got one of those faces that most people recognize, even if they don't know where.
I have not seen any of the Rob Zombie trilogy and don't recall him from any of those things. May have seen him at times, but I'm still completely familiar with his face, and his contribution to the Rob Zombie trilogy.
Even just at conventions, he was a really amazing person. Like, when he was at my first convention, he was one of the first people I got a chance to meet, and I like... He set the bar pretty high, because it's like an autograph with him, like an autograph and a picture was like $20, which is like painfully cheap even then. And then if you brought your own item, it was only $10.
Nice.
And it was around the time, and then like a year or two after that, The Walking Dead blew up, and everyone's like charging like $80 an autograph, $20 just for a selfie. Like this. And Sid Haig went on Facebook and said, I will never charge you more than $20 for an autograph and $10 if you bring your own item. It's been the way since I started doing these, and it's going to be the way I keep doing it, because I don't go to these things for monetary gain.
Okay.
Like, you have to make something if you're going to be there, but he's not there
cover your travel.
He's not there to gouge the fans. So I always really appreciated that, and I told this story on Twitter and Facebook that I got a picture. You can find it on my Facebook of a very baby.
You are adorable.
I was 20 years old. I had red hair, perfect complexion though. I've never really had an issue with acne. And I got to meet Sid Haig, and like we both had the goofiest face on. And my next convention when he was at, I brought that same picture, and I was like, I just thought it'd be funny if I held up the same. We just kept doing the same pose every single time, and I did it once other time, but I can't find the picture.
Damn.
And I was gonna have him sign it each time. Just have a wall of pictures of me and Sid Haig signed. And I presented that idea to him at the second convention. He just looks at me and goes, "You're a weird kid." But I like it. And so I only got a chance to meet him like 2 or 3 times, but he was a great guy, and he'll be missed.
Awesome.
But I guess let's finally get onto the topic that we're going to talk.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was a great episode. Thanks for listening. Make sure you follow us.
Well, we aren't doing a Sid Haig episode, unfortunately, because we'd have a lot of stuff for Nick to watch. He doesn't have that kind of time. We'll be discussing a horror classic in the Amityville Horror.
It's the kind of house they don't build anymore. A relic of a time when the world wasn't in such a hurry, when there was still time for a little charm and elegance. It has stood empty for a long while, and at the price, it is a bargain. For a growing young family, it is almost too good to be true.
What do you think?
I love it.
James Brolin, Margot Kidder, Rod Steiger in the Amityville Horror.
God's peace in this house.
Hello?
Hello, Kathy. Father Delaney, there's something very important.
Mommy, I want to go home.
What do you want from us?
What's all going on? We have to do something.
I'm coming apart! Oh, Mother of God, I'm coming apart!
28 days after the Lutz family moved into their dream house, they were running for their lives. What happened to them is an experience in terror you will never forget, and you will believe in the Amityville Horror.
George and Kathy Lutz are newly married and looking to take their relationship to a new level by buying a house. Kathy, who has 3 children from a previous marriage, wants her kids to love George so they can live a perfect life as the typical nuclear family. However, the house they're buying is coming to them for a truly good price, almost too good a price. George and Kathy find that the house was the scene of a horrific murder only a couple years before, where a young kid, Ronnie DeFeo, killed his entire family with a shotgun. Kathy and George feel they can live with this knowledge and choose to have a family friend, Father Delaney, come by to bless the house. However, things don't go too well for Delaney as he feels an evil in the house and begins to feel violently ill while the room fills with flies. To top it off, in a bellowing voice, the house informs him to get out. This is only the beginning of all the trouble the Lutz family goes through. Directed by Stuart Rosenberg and written by Sandor Stern, the Amityville Horror was adapted from the best-selling book written by Jay Anson, which depicts the supposedly true events of the real hauntings at Amityville. There was a big hearsay about whether or not the Lutz family were being truthful, but producer Samuel Z. Arkoff knew this was a big opportunity. Produced by American International Pictures, the film was considered to be one of the most profitable independent films of all time, and would go on to gain praise from both horror and non-horror fans for its amazing score by Lalo Schifrin, grounded, believable performances, and a sense of dread that fills every scene. The film stars James Brolin, Margot Kidder, Rod Steiger, Murray Hamilton, and Don Stroud as Father Ryan. That was one of my better ones.
It was flawless.
That was one of my better ones.
Like your 20-year-old complexion.
Yeah.
Your intro was flawless.
Flawless. Was this on either of our shame lists? Did we just break the show?
You said that you hadn't seen it in a really long time. So it was not on my shame list.
Pre-high school, for sure. It was the last time I saw it.
And I was like 10 minutes into it when I'm like, hey, have you seen the Amityville Horror? I'd love to talk about it.
Granted,
and you're like, yeah, no, I've been...
It's our podcast. We're making the rules as we go along.
That's right.
But, it's like, oh, this is one of the first times that I feel like it's been a truly situation that we both have seen the film.
Yeah.
But...
We play fast and loose with our rules.
Yeah, we both have an interesting history with this film. We had both seen it before. I guess since it's been the longest for me, I feel like.
Yeah.
I will talk about my feelings on the film. First time I saw the film was a movie that my mom wanted to watch, and I feel like I probably saw it around the time that the remake came out. And I remember she had told me a story, and if I get a chance to, I'm going to go to her house and have her tell this story.
Nice.
She had saw it at a local drive-in, I believe, when it came out, and it scared the shit out of her and her sister, or maybe it was her and her best friend, and they had to walk home. And they always cut down the alley to go home, and there's a house in the alley that had those exact same windows, and they were too afraid to walk down the alley alone. And her telling me this story, I'm like, oh my God, this movie must have been frightening. And I saw it, and I was like probably like anywhere from 13 to 15 years old when I saw this movie, maybe even younger, and I was like, this movie's kind of boring. And it wasn't the type of horror movie I was looking for at the time. And at the time, we'll circle back on this a little more, I liked the remake better because it was more things happening and it was sped up, and I was kind of dumb at the time. Looking back, I think this movie is fantastic, and it's been a situation of every time I've gotten to see it, I think it's getting better and better. And yeah, I also love how much that James Brolin looks like both Josh Brolin and Christian Bale.
Yeah.
So that's my slightly, I don't want to say complicated history with the film, but
With
I
his
wasn't ready
glorious
for
70s hair.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for how slow the film was.
Yeah.
But now I really appreciate, since I like slow burn horror films far more than I used to, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I also probably saw this the first time around the same time that the remake came out, and that's I was particularly interested in it because the remake was filmed around where I went to high school.
Houses here are way out of our price range. When the business is good, we're gonna have the greatest house.
It's beautiful. This is an amazing house. You are going to love it.
Holy, this is the deal of a lifetime. So, what's the catch?
There was a crime, a murder.
In the house?
Several people, a family.
Accused claims he heard voices coming from within the house.
Well, houses don't kill people. To a perfect house and to a perfect family.
Who are you talking to?
The girl who lives in my closet.
And what's her name?
Jody.
What's the matter?
Just seeing things, I guess. Why don't you come back to bed?
I can't sleep. This is my mind.
There was a family lived here some time ago. They had a similar problem.
I'm living in their house. We need to get out of here. Just pack up and go.
Everything we have is in this house.
It's okay, Mommy. Jody won't hurt you. But the man who lives here, she says he's bad.
Almighty God, bless and sanctify this house.
Open the door! It's not opening! I can't open it! George? There's something evil in my house.
I was living there at the time, so it was shot one town over. There were lots of anecdotes of, oh yeah, I saw Ryan Reynolds down at the local bar or whatever.
And this was before Ryan Reynolds was a big name. This was still like romantic comedy Ryan Reynolds,
right?
And not
it was
good.
Post Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place Ryan Reynolds, but pre.
He wasn't big Hollywood name Ryan
Right.
Reynolds at the time. Heck, I don't think he'd even done Just Friends or any of his truly good romantic comedies yet.
Right.
And that was one thing I want to say real quick. Going to that Amityville house in Wisconsin was like a rite of passage for most like horror fans. Like everyone had to go there, and depending on who was living there at the time, determined how nice they were to you.
Right. Well, and they tore those windows. Those windows went down pretty quick after
because
production.
they built them for the movie.
Yeah.
And they one family put them back up. I don't know.
Oh, did they?
But they've since then been taken down to avoid too much attention.
Right. And every time the house goes up for sale, everybody, all my old high school Facebook friends start posting, the Amityville house is back up for sale again,
I do have to say one thing that's funny, and it's only funny for those who've actually been to the house, is in the movie they show them driving down the remake. We'll eventually get to the original movie. you show them driving down the street, and they're like, "Oh, look at that house!" And like that, they're very clearly going fast. But like it's a very perfect slow showing of the house, and then they drive into this driveway that doesn't exist, and they make it seem like it's super far from the road, but like I could throw a rock realistically from the road to the house. It's that close to the road.
Another big scene from the movie that that got us excited, the people I went to high school with, was they drive down a street in Antioch, Illinois, which is just over the border. And so they're showing like the main street. They're having a conversation in the car early on in the film. And you can see like the diner that we went after all of our play practices, and just all of those spots that we frequented a lot.
But so we both saw it because of the remake, which I guess is an interesting conversation about remakes, because I feel like people always complain that a remake will hurt the original, but I feel like if anything, it's just going to turn people to go towards the original.
Right.
But I guess we'll talk more about the remake after we've talked about the main film. What did you? Because you were the one excited to watch this film.
Yeah. I've probably not every year, but I dust off all of the classic horror films this time of year, as many do. And this year in particular, I've been really digging my heels into the late 60s and all through the 70s.
The good shit.
Horror films. So so recently I rewatched The Omen and Rosemary's Baby, Amityville Horror. That's kind of where I've been living lately. And what's particularly interesting right now, both in all three of those films, they move into a new house, and that's kind of an element that gets the action going. And I am right now trying to buy an old Victorian house.
You and your big Victorian houses.
I love them. So while everybody is most people watch this movie and they're like, "Oh my God, the house is clearly haunted. Get out." I'm going, "Yeah, but look at those gorgeous built-ins. It's worth it."
The crown molding is gorgeous,
right? Those are original floors and windows. So it's a little possessed.
Who cares? That's kind of like George. It's like, I can live with this if you can live with
right?
this.
Right. That's no big deal.
I also love too. They're like 80,000. Might as well be 800,000. It's like, I'll take 80. I'll take 80. 100%. I mean, Amanda looked at me. She's like, "When was this movie made?" It's like 79. She goes, And it was like, you couldn't tell by his hair? Which, laugh all you want. His hair and beard combo was fucking amazing.
Oh, that is like Chris Christopherson in A Star Is Born Glorious.
Yes. And Margot Kidder was fantastic in this movie. We're jumping all over the place. But
she was so
good.
charming and adorable, but also strong, and she had to carry while George was the one dealing with he was the embodiment of the evil in the house. She had to carry the emotional, and all the stakes were on her performance.
Yeah, and it's great too, because this is her second appearance on the show. She was also in our she's actually on the show. She was in our Black Christmas episode.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Playing a very, very different role in that, because she was more of the party girl, let's have some fun type of character. I completely believed her as a mother in this movie. And I was thinking about it. It's like the thing that works so well for me in this film are the performances, and the fact that they have two very different. It's obvious they have two very different types of characters, but I just love George's slow descent into insanity, right. Especially if all them going back to him tending the fire. And right. How they touch on it a little bit in the remake, but not nearly as poignant as, George is cold. So I'm going to go build a fire. And, It just him and that fire just kind of become a reoccurring.
And then
trend.
him chopping the wood for the fire,
which
which becomes another like.
And they do.
I need to tend the house
exactly, and they do a fantastic job also of just making him look so tired and so out of it. But the thing I like about it too is it's kind of like Stephen King's The Shining, the book, versus Stanley Kubrick's book, where you get the feeling that George does care, that he is probably a good father or a good father figure, and then he's trying very hard and he's just tired, and you never get the feeling that he's gonna go and he snaps on his family, but you never get the feeling he's gonna go insane and murder them all with an axe or anything like that.
See, that was an issue that I kind of had with the remake, is like if you take the wood chopping scene towards the end when Ryan Reynolds, George Lutz, was making his stepson hold the log while he would chop it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it slipped into it started making it too much about like, well, let me take this a step back. I think, when you think of, well, what's the source of the scare in the Amityville horror? You would say the house, right?
Yeah.
Or the possession. Where on this watching in particular, I think the source of the scare is actually really talking about blended families.
Yeah.
And trusting bringing a new person in to have a close relationship with people that you love.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're bringing a new parent to your kids into this relationship because they played up that stepdad-stepkid dynamic a lot. And I think that is really what this movie is talking about. And while very similar, the remake handled it a little differently, and they pushed it further in a way that I didn't like.
Yeah.
That started to blend. And yeah, you can certainly argue that, the house made him do it, fine, whatever. But the house was still making him do it in the original. Mm-hmm. And it was still frightening, and it still played on that, but it didn't push it into like abuse.
Yeah.
Or, in a way that I didn't care for, the kind of emotional abuse that Ryan Reynolds, George Lutz, was applying to his stepkids.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like it's the scares were far more subtle in the 1979 version, where there was like I said in my intro, a slow creeping dread through the entire film, where things would just kind of build up. And I think part of the reason why the film works for me better now is the fact that I am married and I do own a house, and I have had some of these thoughts in my head, not trying to like go crazy, but it's like, oh, that's a weird sound, or hey, what if something bad had happened at this house and things like that. And like to see, and like what really helps it too is to you really believe James Brolin's descent into madness because of Margot Kidder, where you got to see at the beginning. We didn't get to see a whole lot of it, but I think that's part of what helps. Some people complain about the movie's 2-hour runtime, where you can cut some time out. I'm sure there's some things you could have cut out, but it just gave us more time with the family and to see that they do legitimately care and they do love each other, and that they, they may not see eye to eye on everything. Like there's that, I think, kind of great scene near the beginning of the film where they're going through boxes and he pulls out a cross and says, okay, what do you want to do with this? And she says put it in the other room where the light's going to capture it and everything.
Yeah.
And, then we have this really amazing tracking shot from one room to another.
Across the staircase.
Real quick, I want to say the cinematography in this movie does not get enough credit because it's not very over-the-top showy cinematography. It's almost style with having no style, but it's really great. But like her selling that, hey, this is not the man that I know, there's something wrong with this, helps within that 2-hour time period, because I didn't believe it as much in the remake, where I didn't even get a feeling like they really even liked each other that much.
Well, and in the remake they were actually showing more of them before the house. They were showing kind of their life pre-moving in, and they didn't do that in the original, but you still believed the relationship more in the original, I think. or for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm in the same boat. And like one thing I thought I loved about the original Amityville was, like I said, I keep striving on the fact that it's kind of a slow burn. It takes its time to get to where it's going, which I love. And there's not many, if any, really crazy jump scares or things. It just makes you feel creepy. And then when they do start throwing stuff in, and they're not really explained, like the weird fucking pig creature near the end of the film, and like we're jumping all around, and I apologize for that.
Hold on, what? I'm totally blanking on the weird, creepy pig creature.
Oh, okay. So at the end, near the end, George...
in the original.
Yes. Remember, George goes out to the boathouse, and then he looks back up into the house, and he sees something in the windows. It's like this weird-looking pig creature that he then freaks out and grabs the axe, and you get the feeling that he's going to go up there and try to kill that whatever it was.
Okay.
Go to Google real quick and look up pig creature, Amityville Horror.
I watched it twice.
And you didn't
last
see
week,
the pig
and
creature?
I missed it. Yeah.
And what I love about that, though, is he's going up there with the intention you imagine of killing this pig creature, who some people believe is actually Jody, the creature that the little girl's talking to. He goes up to the axe. Margot Kidder catches him and thinks, oh, he's going to try to kill us. And just the way that they orchestrate that scene is fantastic. You really don't remember the pig creature?
No.
Did you Google it yet?
I'm on it. Maybe I just didn't.
If you blinked, you would have missed it because it's very. It's none of these.
Yeah, even pulling up the images.
It's like purple in the window with red eyes.
Yeah. Wow. Also, there's legitimately I might need new glasses.
Well, get on that because you missed the pig creature.
Right. I just want to zoom. It won't let me zoom. There we go. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I think I saw just motion in the window.
Yeah.
But I think, you started to hit on the right point there. The reason why you believe his journey is because he's not going after the kids. He is responding to what the house is doing to him. He's never all right, now I'm going to start taking out.
Yeah.
He takes his stress out on the kids and the family in the way that is still loving. He's just extremely stressed and depleted.
Yeah, you don't feel
Whereas Ryan Reynolds' George Lutz starts to get abusive, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and you get the feeling that he's like you said, he's just stressed, he's tired. When he snaps on them, it just seems like I'm sorry, I'm not myself right now.
I had a horrible day and I don't have the energy. That's something that and then every parent can.
And then he's it comes out on other people too, when he snaps on the caterer and
right.
Whereas
you're gonna take this check.
Yeah, the remake.
How do you like that?
The remake made me roll my eyes just a little bit when every time they'd leave the house, he's like, "Oh, I feel so much better now." Isn't it great how much better I feel right now? Do you notice how I feel better? We get it. The house is evil. The house is making you feel bad. I get it.
But look at those built-ins.
Yeah, but it's in the original, you get the feeling that just prolonged exposure to this is what's causing this.
Yeah.
And I also like that it had a really gentle hand too when we find out the history of the house. And
I actually in the original, I still felt that it was a little heavy-handed with the exposition of that character being okay, I've done the research and here's the.
It still was, but I felt like.
But then the remake doubles down on that exposition. It starts to now we're gonna show
torture chambers and.
To the original's credit, something that I really appreciated about it. There are, other than the pig ghost that I just now saw, or just learned about, you don't really see any ghosts.
No.
Nobody dies outside of that opening sequence.
Yeah,
in the original. They make it out. Even the dog. They even go back and save the dog.
Yeah. It's kind of even in Jody, in the original movie, so the I guess, liked theory of that is that Jody was that creature, not the little girl of the house of the person that was murdered in the house originally. Like the whole story, the Fayos story is there more as a backdrop. In the original, where it's like, here's what happened in that house, and it's done really effectively in the original film too. And then it's kind of there and it's looming over the house, but it's like not tied in integrally to the story. It's almost kind of weird pacing. It's almost or weird structure. Whereas, okay, we have the Lutzes and they're our main story, but to understand the Lutzes, you need to know what happened to the DeFeos originally. And okay, cool, the DeFeo thing happened. Evilness caused him to do it. It's a recurring thing. Yeah. And then when they bring in the story about Jeremiah Ketchum, and it's like, okay, it's still, now you're adding too much, but you're not overdoing it. I can still get it. Right. At least it's not a torture chamber in the basement. Instead, you just have a big hole full of goo.
Right. But since the resolution for them was just getting out of the house and not coming back for their stuff.
Yep.
Like, I don't think there was any need to go into a bunch of exposition of this is why the house is evil. Like, they accomplished their goal without needing.
Yeah, they could have cut that scene. They could have cut a lot of those scenes and they could have kept the weird pig monster and everything and just.
Yeah. So you can still sprinkle some of that in, but it didn't need to be this like, oh, here's the book that has all of the information. Mm-hmm. And
I do want to ask you. So since we did review The Exorcist on this show as well, and The Exorcist was what year did The Exorcist come out? 1973. So a good while before this.
6 years before.
Exorcist obviously was really tied into the religious side. I could not help thinking that all the stuff with all the religious figures was directly corresponding to The Exorcist.
The Exorcist, The Omen, there was a lot of religious related, like Catholicism specifically. Like Catholicism was in almost all of these 70s. Rosemary's Baby, which I just saw, had elements of it. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting that this era of horror seemed really tied to Catholicism.
Yeah, in a really interesting way as well, because like. The almost subplot of this film is why can't I think of the Reverend's name? Father Delaney. Delaney trying to convince the church that there's something evil in this house.
Right.
And for them being like, you're stupid, stop dealing with this. Yeah. And it's not even tied into the family, because it's not even like the family goes to him and be like, hey, we want you to do. They didn't even know he showed up.
Right.
Like they don't go try to find a priest until later on. So it's Father Delaney trying to convince them of this, and like other people would have been like, "Oh, we can just cut this whole subplot out."
Well, the remake only
they did cut it out.
Like cut a lot of it. There was one scene, and where this scene happens in almost the opening in the original, it's moved to like middle of the movie,
and it works so much better near the beginning.
Yeah. He just comes, does it, has the weird effect, and runs off. It was like it removed all of that anchor and then became unnecessary. Also, I will say that this film is probably has the most vomiting clergy that I've ever seen.
I do need to mention real quick that I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes at one point for quotes from this movie, and if you go to Rotten Tomatoes and look up quotes from the Amityville Horror, they have a quote from the nun. I can't remember what her name is. I think it was like Aunt Helena or something like that.
Yeah,
and her quote is just in parentheses vomiting.
The subtitles describe it as retching.
Oh, I thought that was great. One thing I will say, that despite the runtime on this film, and it gives you a lot of time to really breathe and get to know the characters, there's also some stuff that's just not very well explained, or it's not very clear. Like, I'm usually in the thought process that you don't need a lot of exposition, but you still need this movie puts exposition on the wrong stressors. They put expositions on. It was Jeremiah Ketchum in the remake. Yeah. I think it was like John Ketchum in the original, whatever.
Okay.
They put a lot of exposition on that, and granted, they do it I think in a way that appeals more to my sensibilities, where it's just them sitting there talking, looking at the book, as opposed to like, here's creepy flashbacks of all this stuff. I'd much prefer just someone talking about it. But like, me and Amanda had to go back and forth and be like, wait, are they married? Are those kids his? Because we weren't too sure. Because like they had a couple throwaway lines, and something like that shouldn't be throwaway. Where he was like, "Well, I just want them to like, or like, well, at least they're not calling me George anymore." That was the big one. But it's like it's like we really don't know for sure. And then even when the priest comes, I was like, me and Amanda was like, did he just invite himself in? Is he breaking in? Does he know this house? Does he know this house is possessed and is just trying to do it? And then we find out halfway through the film, oh well, we invited him. Why the didn't you say that earlier in the movie? Sorry, I went on a diatribe there, but like they're putting the exposition in the wrong scenes.
Yeah, I wonder if some of the whether or not they're married thing is a result of the like taboo of remarrying back then, because a lot of that exposition, though I think it was done well, it was during them touring the home with the real estate agent.
Yeah.
But I noticed that it didn't land in the way that I think it did back then, because they say, yes, I have 3 kids, and then they go to another room or something, and they say, we're newly married. And so I think they're playing on the social
He does
taboo.
Make a joke or something there, because I remember him smiling and Margot Kidder's like smacking him like, you're bad or something like that.
I think it was playing on the taboo of getting divorced and remarried of the time that just doesn't land today as much. And I think that's might be part of why it didn't make sense or was easy to misconstrue.
It's there. I'm not going to say it's not there, because it definitely is. I just feel like it wasn't as clear. Same thing with like, you didn't know that they knew Father Delaney. And the only reason I was able to put it together that they did was the fact that later on when Aunt Helen came, and she's also she's a nun. It's like, okay, you know a nun. I can believe that you'd know a priest as well. And then I think she works at a Catholic school just based on the outfit she was like. I put it together I figured out that she knew them.
Right. Well, I think the nun was her Margot Kidder, Melissa's sister, like actual sister.
Okay.
Because they talked about when she always pinches our cheeks, and like it had I think it was the kid's actual aunt.
Okay.
Even if it was through marriage, possibly.
Yeah.
But she also had the little brother who was getting married with the whole money disappearing sequence.
Which was gone out of the remake as well.
Yeah. And that one kind of, like, they have a quick little line about, my brother's wedding. But it did jump around a bit narratively, but in a way that didn't bother me at all.
Yeah. Like I said, the thing I liked so much was that you could tell that George was dealing internally with something, and it was affecting him, but like it didn't, the film, I didn't feel like it was going to go this route, and it didn't. I never felt like, this is going to become a George trying to murder his family film, which like
which the remake 100% turns into that.
Yeah. And, like, I feel like it's one of those things that maybe over time, if they would have stayed at that house, George would have gotten to that point. Sure, because that's where Ronnie eventually got. But it's like, like, especially in the end of the remake, when you see Ryan Reynolds chasing after them with an axe and everything, it's like, this is... They couldn't tell if they wanted to remake The Shining or if they wanted to remake Amityville Horror. Right. And I just couldn't... Also, I have to say, I just couldn't take... Like, Ryan Reynolds is a good actor, and there's a lot of movies I like him. I could not take him seriously in that role at all.
Is it because of his gorgeous abs?
Yeah, why? He's got enough time to constantly have his abs looking on point. But then, like, anytime he'd look at in the camera, I just thought he was going to say something stupid. every time.
I don't think I bought him as an abusive stepdad either.
No.
Like, and had the film not gone quite that direction with it, maybe, then it would have been easier to take him in that role. It was just strange.
Yeah, it was just definitely the choices made in that film are just weird. Like a friend.
Two things that I will say for the remake that I really liked. I did really like the cinematography.
I was okay on it. I think my biggest issues come from it are that it was just the early 2000s look of all the horror films and its extreme way of coloring. It wasn't bad, but I definitely prefer. I thought they were a little ballsier in the original one, but that's just me.
Yeah, I also loved the cinematography in the original, especially the feel of that, like, you know, it's obviously supposed to be New York.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where the original was filmed, but
I think it's like Long Island or something.
The same look that the Midwest has in the fall, which makes, you know, the filming location of the remake made perfect sense, but it's very nostalgic for me. But the other thing is I did also really like Melissa George's performance as Kathy Lutz.
Okay. This may not be the greatest review for the original for the Amityville horror remake, but the other day I gotta tell this story. Me and Amanda were going to see Peter Pan for my birthday. Yeah. And we took a couple of days off, and I was lamenting, and I was like, "Oh, I was hoping we got the chance to watch a couple more movies." And she's like, "What are you talking about? We watched one every day." And I was like, "Fair." He's like, "But the one yesterday didn't count." I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Oh, I watched a movie after you went to bed. We didn't watch together." It's like, "No, we watched 2 movies that day." He's like, "What's the other movie we watched?" She's like, "We watched the remake to the Amityville Horror." I was like, "We did?" Like, we had literally just watched it the day prior, and I forgot about watching it. Like, that's, I guess, my review of the Amityville Horror 2005. My favorite review of it, though, actually comes from Brennan Klein, who was on an episode in season 1 on slasher films. His review on Letterboxd is the best. He gave it a 1.5 stars. He said, "A shirtless, wet Ryan Reynolds can make up for a lot of a movie's sins, but not if they're this ample and idiotic. Lopping off 40 minutes could have only improved the original film, but they make all the wrong decisions in condensing it."
Yeah. I agree. There's the bit about, like, him accidentally killing the dog, which I thought was unnecessary.
Yeah.
Adding Jody in much more frequently, like, was unnecessary.
Okay, I'm glad you brought this up because 100% agree, because, like, the original film, or not the original film, the new film is just so painfully on the nose, because the original film is able to make a chair that rocks once or twice the scariest thing in the movie, because you just see this little girl sitting there talking to a chair. And I love it too, because at the beginning of the film, you don't know, it's like it could just be legitimately an imaginary friend. You don't know. You don't know there's anything sinister about it, or we've been preconditioned to believe that any child talking to themselves is in fact evil, but you don't know. And just once, I want someone to make a movie where it legitimately is an imaginary friend that has nothing to do with the story, because I think it'd be a great bait and switch. But, you know, she's talking to, you know, and the mom's, like, playing along with it. It's like, "Oh, hi, Jody," and everything, and she leaves the room, and then the chair rocks once or twice. And it's like, oh, shit, she's not kidding. But that doesn't happen until...
was it just the wind?
Yeah, and it doesn't happen until halfway through the film, so we've had some time to get to know Jody, that she talks to him, but it's like the first time you see Jody in the remake, it's like, here's a creepy little girl that's been overdone with CGI and makeup, and of course they have the terrible stinger near the end where she's dragged down to... It's like... It feels like producer notes. It's like, oh, this movie's not scary enough. Add some oomph to the movie.
The original was about the house and about the family.
Yeah.
The remake was about the ghosts and Ketchum and how they made George go crazy.
Yeah.
And but not in the, like, that they made him do it versus like questioning that slow descent in the original. And yeah.
Like, and I agree with Brennan's review. Like, I feel like if you could have cut like maybe not 40, but I feel like you can cut like maybe 30 minutes out of the original film. Like some of the stuff, Father Delaney arguing that they need to exercise the house and all the stuff that never really pays off again. You could cut some of that out. I'm okay with it too, but I can see how making it maybe a little snappier would have helped. I'm honestly really okay with it. I thought I think this movie is just going to keep growing as being something that I think is fantastic. And one of the reasons, sorry, continue.
I tend to like longer edits.
Yeah,
and I think people's like, cut more time out, cut more time out, cut more time out. Like I tend to disagree with that impulse. Now there are certainly films that go on too long, but I think like taking time to explore is like not this universal problem that needs to constantly be remedied. And this certainly did not, like, it kept my attention the whole time, so why would you cut anything out of it? I don't think it would have been better for that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And like one of the things that works so well for me is, you know, like I said, it's tense, it's weird, it's also at times kind of blunt, which I like. And what I love about it too is Lalo Schifrin's score for the film is counteractive to what we're seeing on screen.
Right.
He's not going for a very overly dreary, scary score. He's going for something kind of nice and whimsical and interesting.
Idyllic.
Yes.
Like, here's the happy, beautiful family, and that really works.
Yeah. And like one thing I also like about the original film too is you get the feeling that these are real people, because they're not just talking about, it's like, oh, because like sometimes movies will have a bad habit, and I get it, because you know a lot of people are trained in terms of screenwriting to be like, you know, this is an issue I personally have. I can see both sides of it. I feel like some people are very too much like, you know, if it doesn't service the plot, don't have it in the film. If it doesn't service the plot, don't have it in the film. And I can see that because it helps you kind of get to the root of what you're doing in the film. Yeah. And I feel like a screenwriter should always be thinking about that instead of going off on all their flights of fancy. But like one thing I liked about this film so much was I felt like the characters were real people, because they would talk about stuff besides just the weirdness that's happening in the film. You know, they'd have long conversations just about financial issues, and like, we can't really afford this house, you're not getting as many jobs, your business partner's freaking out that, you know, you haven't been doing it. It's like, you get the feeling that they're real people.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the solution to what you were saying there is just having a broader definition of what services the plot. I think what you just described does service the plot, and it does build important foundations that you need in order to pay off on those themes. It's just that they're a little more abstractly servicing.
Because think about it this way: if you take the original Amityville Horror and remove the opening scene of Ronnie DeFeo killing everyone, you remove the John Ketchum near the end, and you remove all of the creepiness, it's essentially a film about these people who bought a house. They're trying to be idyllic, and they bought this house, and they realized they couldn't afford this house, and this is more than they're looking for in their life. And every morning, he's taunted. He can't sleep because he's freaking out about the financial aspects of it. And then if you think about that money disappearing, you'd think, oh, maybe he took it because he actually needs the money, but then he ended up having to pay the caterer anyway. It's like, this is a story about a man who bought a house because he wants to start a family, but he's not ready for it. The film still works.
You know what's funny is the other movie that I was thinking of as I was watching it is, I believe it's Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn, but I could be wrong about that. The comedy, The Money Pit.
Money Pit? No, that's actually Tom Hanks.
You're right.
You're right.
That is Tom Hanks.
I can't think of the other person in that movie.
I completely. Why?
But now I want to see a movie with Goldie Hawn and Chevy Chase. I think you're thinking of Funny Farm.
Yeah. But I was thinking of the movie The Money Pit.
That is Tom Hanks and Shelley Long.
Okay.
Best scene in that movie, just real quick, tangential, is when he has to pay, I think, the roofer, and he's walking to the house counting the money, and he stands over the rug and starts slowly going through the hole in there, and he's like stuck with, and he's like trying to get his way out. He can't. It just goes back to counting the money while he's in the hole. It's the best scene in that movie.
Now I have to, let's see. Yeah, Funny Farm is what I was thinking
Yes.
of. That's funny.
That's Funny Farm.
Funny Farm, but the one other thing that I'll say about the remake, and it is a tiny thing that in no way redeems the problems, but I really enjoyed the little nod to the original in the bedroom mirror. The mirror that was over their bed was that same like golden stippled
I
thing
commented to Amanda about that I
that
kind of
took up the whole
that.
room in the original.
Yes, it's so gross but amazing at the same time. So I think we're both on a similar thought process here that we just, didn't love the remake very much.
Yeah. It was okay. I didn't hate it. Like it was
I kind of did.
It was all right.
I don't hate very much, but like I told after this viewing, it's like I'm never going to watch this movie again. Ever.
Yeah. I think it was a victim of what was happening to a lot of horror movies in this era.
Oh, definitely. Like I feel like I'm a firm believer that anyone goes into making a remake, it goes in with good intentions. But if you just look at the company that put it out at the time, which was the Platinum Dunes label, they were notorious for their kind of just making all the horror films the same.
Yeah.
Or all the horror remakes the same, if that makes sense.
I think they were like, hey, let's take that good story and make it scarier.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they made it less scary.
Yeah, like, they... Like, it's funny, they have a weird habit of making... So, like, they did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 2003, the remake to that. Okay. And it's got the same exact, to the dot, runtime as the original film, and it feels longer to me. Okay. Amityville Horror is a shorter movie by 30 or 40 minutes, and it felt longer to me. So they have this habit of, like, just, like, there's less going on, or just as much going on, but it feels longer.
Yeah, that the pacing's all off on it. The last note that I have, and it's so hard, we watched both movies. And I don't want to spend the entire episode comparing the two, but that's what kind of we ended up setting up for ourselves. I found that the opening, or the exposition of the what had happened a year prior, with the DeFeo kid, I found it so effective in the original, where during the house tour, you got just these little flashes of every time they went into a room, you saw the gunshot blast that happened in that room.
Yes.
That
I forgot about that.
It gave the house, like, memory.
Yeah.
It felt like the house had those events anchored into it, that it had seeped into its walls, and that the house never forgot it. In the remake, they just did it as this big flashback sequence separated from them, and it just was not nearly as effective.
Yeah.
You saw more and got less out of it.
Yeah, and like I loved that, and I loved. It's just a simple scene, but the scene up in the attic when George and Kathy are talking about whether or not they should buy the house, it's just. Like, I wanted to, like, it's like I just wanted to see this young crazy couple succeed. And I guess I also, like, part of that comes from the fact that I was in their position. I didn't buy a house that had someone been murdered in, but, like, walking around a house being like, this is great. We can't afford this. Why are we doing this? We should have just stayed with my mother longer, or we should have just stayed at our apartment. Why are we doing this? This is dumb.
Yeah. Or this is affordable and it's everything we wanted. Why?
Yeah. Oh, one thing.
What's the catch?
I do have to say, like, it's. I love. We're talking about the subtlety of the original, and even when it's not the most subtle, because I'm not gonna lie, there's some things that's still a little heavy-handed on, but whatever,
absolutely.
Whatever. It's not nearly as heavy-handed as the remake, where, I love that. I remember halfway, I was telling Amanda, it's like, oh, I believe George, if I'm remembering correctly, George is a handyman, and they don't really ever talk about it very much, but it comes on later on that you find out. And I love like one of the first things out of Ryan Reynolds' mouth is like, he's like, well, I work construction. I know how much this house would cost. Are you sure you're correct? It's like,
so do you work in construction, George?
did you not see me pull up my George Lutz construction? Yeah, in parentheses, yes, I'm a construction worker truck.
Beautiful.
Yeah. One thing I will say, neither film, I don't think we like. Well, actually, no. I stand corrected. The remake, you did see George doing some work around the house. You saw him building walls and such. So, because in the original, I don't think you ever see, other than him picking up the axe to chop wood. I don't think you see him even do anything around the house.
He grabs the pickaxe from his business partner's wife in the basement when he's knocking down that wall in the basement.
That doesn't count. That's not anything to do with his job.
Destruction.
Yeah, it's not construction. It's destruction. It's
also, how did the inside of those bricks get painted red like that?
I was wondering that myself. And what is the black goo that was coming out of their toilets? Is like my first thought, because it came out of their toilets and everything, and I was like, when he fell into it, I was like, oh, that's poo water.
It doesn't smell like taco to me, senor. Speaking of which, I saw It 2.
Oh, yeah? Real quick, before you go...
Speaking of horror film remakes.
Before you go to that, because I do want to talk about that as well. So, we had just watched Poltergeist, and I realized Poltergeist and Amityville Horror have a very similar plotline. But I remember at the end of Amityville, when, after George goes back and gets the dog and he runs out and everything, I kept thinking, when does the house, start to float and turn into, a little crushed ball? And I realized, no, that was Poltergeist.
Oh, oops. The first time, so like I said, I watched it twice this week. The first time I watched it on my own, and about halfway through, I texted Raina and I'm like, "Baby, should we ask our realtor if this was built on an Indian burial ground or something?"
It's important to ask.
Yeah, and I think they have to legally disclose that.
And if Poltergeist has taught me anything, if you find out the house was built on just a regular cemetery, make sure they move the bodies.
Right? Yeah.
They didn't just move the tombstones. Craig T. Nelson in Poltergeist screaming at his boss, like, "You move the body." He's like, "You move the headstones, but not the bodies." And he goes, "Why? What?" But it sounds like he's just going, "Rawr!" and just screaming sounds at him. It's the best.
Why? Because it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah, it's all about the money, man. Come on. You knew what we were all about, Craig T. Nelson.
Don't act like you weren't complicit.
Yeah, you knew about it.
Willful ignorance.
We were digging the hole for your house, and we found a finger, and we were like, "Oh, that's just what happens sometimes." You were there. Okay, so you want to talk a little bit about It Chapter 2 before we wrap up?
Yeah. So, have you seen it?
Yes, I saw it opening night.
Nice.
Yeah.
I had the kids opening night, so I saw it a week later.
I'll take them. It'll put some hair on their chest.
Right. Lane's all excited about it. She talks about Pennywise all the time.
Creepy.
Yeah.
That's not good.
So
she'd be the first one going down that storm cellar.
Overall, I think an over-reliance on jump scares for both films of the remake.
I agree with that.
I don't think it needs the jump scares.
I don't think so. And my thing is the jump scares don't bother me as much as the CGI enhanced jump scares, because in my personal opinion, some of the scares that worked the best in that film were the ones that they just allowed creepy things to happen. But that didn't bother me as much, just because I've come used to it. Yes, would I prefer a more subtle Amityville style telling of it? 100%. Yeah. Would they have been able to make it and do the book nearly as much justice? Would doing it small? No.
Right.
No.
Right. My two thoughts were the cast was incredible, particularly Bill Hader.
Yep.
I loved him in this movie. And I'll go on record saying that I loved the 90s film. However, I never found it all that scary.
No, not at all.
because of Tim Curry, who had an amazing performance, but it was like over the top, silly Tim Curry as a scary clown. I was much more afraid of, I can't pronounce his name.
I think it's like something Skarsgård.
I was much more afraid of his Pennywise than I was Tim Curry's. I love Tim Curry's Pennywise. I don't like one more than the other, but I was more afraid of Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise.
I thought there was a lot of nods to the book, because I had read the book very recently, and there was a lot of nice nods to the book as well. Like, it's as faithful as an adaptation as you can without it being completely absurd. Like, we people online, other Stephen King fans, were jokingly referred to as going full turtle. I don't, because they didn't have Mandarin, the cosmic turtle that controls the world. There's no way to really do that. And they didn't have some of that stuff, which I'm fine with, because that stuff's not going to translate. The original Ritual of Chud wouldn't have worked either, because you're telling jokes to Pennywise, and like it's so much of it happens between a mind meld between them and the creature that it wouldn't have worked. But people are complaining about the length of the film. To me, it didn't feel long. I don't know, maybe
me either.
Like,
and
Amityville shorter. Amityville felt longer than It Chapter 2, because It Chapter 2 was constantly moving.
You had 5 or 6, 7 different stories to tell.
Yeah.
And then the story that you're telling of all of them together. Like, runtime conversations tend to frustrate me, because, also in my job, in all of my media related jobs, when people are like, I think it should be 2 minutes. I'm like, well, why do you think that?
Yeah.
I think there should be 10. Why do you think that?
Yeah.
The length should be however long it takes to properly tell your story. And you don't know that until you're putting the story together.
Yeah. Well,
and there was that. It is a very big story. It needs to be longer in order to properly tell it. Otherwise, it's rushed.
Yeah, and I don't, like, if I had any complaint, it was that some of the flashbacks that we're seeing in this film could have just very easily just been in the first part. But I don't know. The runtime didn't bother me. It just felt like it was moving.
Yeah.
Because like I see the runtime complaint all the time online, and I jokingly said on someone's Facebook thing that's like, "Oh, bitch about the runtime of It," and then I'll put an asterisk. Goes and watches Avengers Endgame for the 7th time, because like people had no problem following that movie and watching that movie, and the person's like, "Well, Avengers Endgame constantly moved," and I was like, "Well, that's just a matter of opinion," because I was so bored through a good chunk of that film.
Yeah,
it's like,
and it was constantly moving.
Yeah, like, it could have been shorter, sure. It didn't bother me that it was longer, and then
I think it would have suffered from being shorter.
And the movie's very divisive. There's a lot of people online who don't like it, who think it's too long or it's not effective. That I get it. I get it. I think what it really comes down, because I have some friends too who just don't really like the film, and what it comes down to, some of the issues that they have are more so in line with Stephen King's original story than...
It's an adaptation argument.
Like, I was listening to a podcast that was breaking down the screenplay of the original It movie, and they all... Because there's a podcast out there called Writers Blockbusters, where I think is a clever title. There are 2 screenwriters and a filmmaker that sit down, and they don't discuss the film like we do. They sit down and talk about it from a screenwriting standpoint, of a beat to beat. It's a little more in depth than what we do. And all that they had to say is like their biggest issues with the script come from the original book. It's like, hey, if we, instead of having 5 characters, if we condense it down to 3 or 4, it could, combined a couple characters together. But you can't do that when it's an adaptation, or you can, but you're going to be alienating an audience.
Right.
So, no, I genuinely liked it, and I know Andrew Muschietti, or however you pronounce the director's name, has been teasing a 5-hour cut with all the films, with both of them put together.
Oh, really?
And I'd be all for that. But honestly, I think what it comes down to, I personally think the best way to adapt a Stephen King book is do it as a miniseries.
Miniseries.
Unless you're adapting a short, or one of his shorts, you can put that into a film. Like, I think the best ones are. I think a lot of people are catching on to that right now and are doing miniseries. Like even the Dark Tower is going to be getting a Netflix an Amazon Prime remake.
Have you seen Castle Rock?
Not yet. I've been meaning to.
I think I talked about it in one other episode. I actually just rewatched the first season, and they've announced the second season coming up, I think, in a couple months. It's really interesting. Also stars Bill Skarsgård. And I think it's a really interesting, like, mashup of his stories. It's really cool.
Me and Amanda plan to start it soon. We just watched The Boys on Amazon and finished that up. I've been wanting to watch Castle Rock, and now with season 2 coming, like, I think we talked about this. My biggest thing with binging is I don't like to binge watch things because then it's over too quickly. I miss having to wait once a week. Because someone was pointing out online, it's like, had we gotten an episode of Stranger Things every week, we'd just be finishing up, and it would have been this thing that we all could have been discussing and having fun with. And instead, most people forgot it even happened.
Right.
Because we went through it in a week, and now it's done. So that's the way I do things. I like to spread it out. Even like when I did watch the first season of Stranger Things, I watched one episode a day, and like that was my treat.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, but I think that's it for us.
I think so. You got are the coppers gonna get you?
I think they're coming to get us because we're going long.
Okay.
It's funny. I was gonna talk about a disc that I got to review, but I feel like I can just do that as a bonus episode.
Okay. Cool.
You heard those cops through the mic?
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. Good microphone. So real quick, we should discuss before we go. What are we doing next? Are we gonna do our Taxi Driver episode, or are we gonna do The Omen?
I'm down for either. Though I have already seen The Omen, so
I have not. I've also not seen Taxi Driver. So
I saw it like 2 days ago, so it's fresh.
So if you want, we could do that one next.
So
and
I'd lean for doing that one next if you're down for it.
Yeah, I think I'm down with that.
All right.
Cool. Well, then we're gonna do The Omen next, and it's gonna be a good time. And
as always, we reserve the right to change our mind.
Oh, of course, because we were supposed to do Taxi Driver like 2 episodes ago. So
yeah,
screw it.
One other thing that I'm gonna shamelessly self-promote.
You mean shamelessly self-promote?
As many of you already know, I operate a public access TV station in Maryland, and we're connected. We're a part of a bigger arts foundation that also operates 2 music venues out of the theater. So one of the things that I have been working on developing is a more curated YouTube page where we film some of the acts that come through and post that there. So if you're ever looking to discover new artists, particularly, I mean, we do a lot of everything, but we do a lot of like Americana, folk, blues, kind of stuff. We have some bigger name acts. We have some smaller, things for you to discover. But if you're interested, if you listen to music and you're looking for something fresh, go to youtube.com/Avalon Theater Maryland. And we have some cool playlists set up so you can just listen to our folk stuff or listen to our blues stuff or watch an entire concert in a playlist because they're all broken up in individual songs. A couple that I've really been jamming out on lately is an older show that we filmed, The Bad Bad Hats.
That's a great name.
I believe they're a Minnesota band,
cool.
Actually. And then 2 recent ones is Pierce Eden's, and I just posted Smoothhound Smith. All great groups. So if you're down, check out youtube.com/Avalon Theater Maryland.
That's fantastic.
All right, so
yeah,
self-promotion over.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to self-promote other than the show, but theoretically you're already listening to that. So.
Yeah. But make sure that you follow us and subscribe and comment and like on Stitcher Radio, iTunes,
You got this.
Google Play,
Yeah.
Libsyn, and SoundCloud.
Yeah, you got it. Wait, did you get Spotify?
Did I get them all?
I think you might have missed.
And Spotify.
No,
I
you
didn't.
don't. No,
and that's the one that I listen to it on. And Spotify. I'm getting there.
You're getting there, you know.
We're so many places.
We
You've
are,
done such a great job of getting us out there.
Spotify, I personally think, has been a big one. So while it was a headache having to change places, I think it's ultimately been... It's kind of cool going to Spotify and seeing us.
Yeah.
Like, it's the biggest music streaming service out there.
And it's us.
Yeah.
We're there.
We are there. We are where the big boys play. So I'm going to probably end this episode with a sound clip of Craig T. Nelson screaming, and I think we're out.
Nice. All right, well, if you don't like that...
Oh, I haven't done this in a couple
I've got
weeks.
2 words for you.
If you're not down with that, I got 2 words for you. Watch movies.
Watch movies.
Thank you for reminding me about that. It's been a while since I've done that.